Thanks, Trey. Hi, everyone. Excited to be doing another webinar for allocations, showing you some of the new functionality and also talking about a couple of the strategies that we've been hearing feedback from our customers. Just by way of introduction, I've spent about 2 decades in the retail planning software industry. I've been fortunate enough to work with some major retailers around the world globally and implementing specifically functionality like allocations and assortment planning, merchandise financial planning. So looking forward to spending some time with you. As Trey mentioned, please feel free to ask any questions. We'll probably keep the questions for the end, unless I can address them during the session. And yeah, looking forward to spending some time with you. So the agenda for today is really to look at the basics of allocations. So, what allocations is all about: managing your entire assortment of products and executing on your assortment strategies. So how do we introduce new products? How do we manage core products? How do we manage the seasonal life of products throughout their life cycle and manage that process? How do we allocate potentially of purchase orders? It's a very important aspect of introducing new products. How do we utilize holdback and push for managing strategies where you just need to get everything out of the warehouse, or you want to hold back a certain portion of the inventory? So it's kind of tweaks on the basic strategies. And the way that we'll go through the demonstration today is we will talk about the basics and then we'll get into those more detailed examples. Overall, we're going to also talk a little bit about how we're utilizing our AI and machine learning algorithms in the background to assist in the allocation process, the ultimate goal of which is to maximize that full price sell-through of your products. So if we just quickly set the scene for how allocations works within Toolio, really the way that we think about it is maintaining a strategy that will drive a projection that allows you to execute all the way down to a store SKU level. So our strategies include the what, where, when, and how. And from there, we let the system make the best possible estimates in terms of how best to allocate that stock. And ultimately, we spit out the results at that lowest level of detail. You have the ability to roll up and see all of this at any point in time in the future. The key to the allocations functionality within Toolio is that we are demand driven. So we think about allocating demand and letting the system optimize towards that demand. Okay. So let's jump into the tool and we'll start talking about the functionality. And I always like to start kind of at the end of allocations. What is the ultimate goal that we have for allocations? The goal for allocations is to be able to project out how much inventory you need to have in your locations at any point in time in the future. And we do this in the optimal manner. And what this gives me is a projection at that lowest level of detail of how much stock, how much we're expected to sell, how much is coming in, how much is flowing out of the warehouses. And you can then start thinking about using this information in any way you need to. So for instance, I can roll it all up and I can look at a store perspective and every store and see how much is the store expecting to get on any given week or any given day. I can see how much I'm expecting to sell in the stores, how much returns I'm expecting back, what's being received in, what's being transferred out. And you can use this information for various aspects of your organization, including things like workforce management. If I know that I'm allocating out 50,000 units from my warehouse next week, I know that I will have to add additional resources in order to pick, pack, and ship that product. So allocations is not just about physically putting the right product in the right store. It also manages the entire process of executing on your assortment decisions. So in allocations, there are 3 different components. There is the plan, which we're looking at here, which is essentially a roll-up of our allocation strategies that we create. We then have the strategies sections, which is the basis of our plan. We set a strategy and then the system tries to get us as close to that strategy as possible. That means if I need to tweak the strategy along the way, I have different inputs that I can tweak the strategy with. And then finally, the output of all of this is the recommended transfer orders. The system is going to recommend exactly how much needs to go to each one of the locations, when it needs to go. Is it recommending that we pull it from stock or a purchase order that might be coming in? How do we cross-stock that stock and get it out to the stores? So let's jump into the allocation strategy section. And when we think about allocation strategies, as I mentioned before, they can be very simple in terms of their setup. All we need to do is really tell the system or answer a few questions that the system needs in order to generate its allocation projection and do all of the hard work for us. Obviously, for every product that we have available for us, we'll know what the product is. And the next question we need to answer is, where is that product going to go? To manage that, we have the ability to select different location lists. A location list is essentially just a subset of locations that are eligible to receive that product. You can think about this from a perspective of, do you want to send this to all doors? Do I want to send it to my top doors? Do I want to send it to only warm climate doors? Do I want to send it to doors with walls? You can come up with whatever different strategy you may have in order to set the eligibility of these products. In the ideal world, you will link your allocation strategies to your assortment, because if you've bought the product for 50 stores, you don't then want to allocate it to 100 stores. It's that sort of disconnect that gets a lot of retailers in trouble. And by marrying the assortment planning process with the allocation process, we can actually inherit a lot of those decisions, so that as a starting point, the user wouldn't even have to select which stores the product goes to, because we've already made that decision upstream when we bought the product as part of the assortment planning process. So we know what the product is and we know where the product is going. The next question we want to answer is, when is the product going to be available for the customers to buy? This is about defining the life of the product. If you've got a core ongoing product, you don't have to set an end date. But by setting an end date, we can define the ideal life of the product. And as a result of that, we're able to then project how that product is going to perform through its entire life and highlight any exceptions where you may be overstocked, understocked, or maybe ending on a sell-through that may be too low for the organization. That allows you to make decisions in terms of, do you want to mark the product down? Do you want to promote it? Do you want to push it to outlet? There's various different decisions that you can then make based on that projection. But by defining the life of the product, we're allowed to then define when that product is expected to sell, and therefore maximize the potential for those sales by allocating the right product to the stores. All right. So I know what, I know where, and I know when the product is going to be there. The next question we have to ask goes to the heart of allocations, especially within Toolio, and that is the demand that we expect from a product. And this is where you can start thinking about demand in different ways. The demand for a product, by allocating demand for a product, we're able to pull the ideal amount of stock to the stores as needed. So how do I come up with demand? Well, the most basic example could be a seasonal product, a very short life cycle product where you plan to bring it in. In this example over here, I'm planning to bring it in towards the end of November, and I want to be out of that product by the end of January. Now, in this case, I've actually bought 1,000 units for this product. And if I jump into my views over here, I can actually bring in the source inventory, so I can see how much inventory I have available to allocate. I can also see how much I have on order. So I'll know how much inventory I have to allocate to those stores, and I can simply use that as a basis for my recommendation for how I'm going to allocate the product. So in the examples that we have, we can then define what sort of strategy I want to take in terms of my demand. And there's 3 different demand types. The first one is the total sales quantity. If I've bought 1,000 units and I'm planning to get rid of all 1,000 units, I can simply just type in whatever I've bought, in this case, 1,000 units. If I have a core item that is ongoing, I can use the item plan, which is the plan that was used to buy the product, and therefore that's the plan that I want to execute against. And the third option might be a rate of sale. A rate of sale is an easy way to think about product performance. Typically, we can look back at historic products, and we've got reporting for that allows you to see how did products perform or similar products perform, what is the basis for their sales potential in the stores, and the system will then utilize that as the basis for the demand. So in my example, I'm just using 1,000 units of demand in the total sales quantity. So what does that get me? when I utilize the historic or the total sales quantity, what it's essentially going to do for me is it is going to allocate those 1,000 units out across all of my different locations that I've specified in my location strategy. And based on your supply chain setup, the system will then recommend the allocation of the stock out of the location that it's sourcing from. In this case, my web and my DC are one and the same. So the system will ensure that it's allocating enough to satisfy the stores, but it is also holding enough inventory to satisfy the e-commerce demand. And as I go through each one of these locations, I can obviously see highlighted in green here, how much is the system allocating not only the initial allocation, but also all of the subsequent allocations through the life of the product. In the ideal basis, what we want to be able to do by the end of the life of this product is end at or near 0 units. We should be allocating enough stock to maximize that sell through, but not leave me with too much stock where I'm not able to sell it, or I'm unweighted in terms of where the stock is sitting in the different locations. So what we're able to do is give you a full projection of every product in every location. In this case, I'm just using a simple one size product. In this case, it's just one size product to demonstrate, but we'll talk about sizing in a couple of minutes as well. Now, as you can see for this one, in this example, store number 1, we're expecting to hold somewhere between 30, 25, and 30 units at any time, at any point in time. In some cases, slightly more, slightly less. And that's because demand isn't linear. Demand is also shaped based on expected increases or decreases, which could be related to both seasonality, and it could also be related to promotions. So we want to be able to take that into account when we're allocating. And this is one of the big advantages of allocating towards demand, as opposed to pushing out stock and then filling back into that stock in a reactive manner. If I scroll down to a couple of the other stores over here, I might see that in this particular example, store number 10, it's expected to hold around about 4 units per week. And that's because the demand for this product or this type of product is very low in that particular store. You're going to have all sorts of different types of demand for product in different locations. And the system is able to measure that demand based on historic contributions. And we can actually see that if we tap on our location contributions tab over here, we can see for these types of products, the expectation is that about 46% of the sales are going to come from our web, from e-commerce sales, and about 9% are going to come from this store, all the way down to about 1.1% is going to come from the store. And that is the system doing its modeling to tell me how well I expect, at least initially, for this product to do in these stores. Now, you might say to me, well, okay, that's great. I know I'm only going to sell 1 unit a week or 2 units a week, but in reality, I have to fill a shelf, and that product needs to be available, and the store needs to look good in the store in terms of the products that are presented in those stores. So that's where we can start adding on to that basic allocation strategy. So the basic allocation strategy is what the product is, where the product's going, when it's going to be there, and how much am I expecting to sell. Now I can start getting into the details of tweaking the modeling. So I can start putting things in like sales curves or size curves. I can start considering things like my order cycle, which is the frequency in which I want to put stock into the stores or replenish those stores, as well as the safety stock that I want to hold. But in addition to that, I could also set a presentation strategy. And a presentation strategy is going to ensure that regardless of demand for that product, I will have a certain amount of presentation in those stores. And if I just rerun that strategy, it's going to go and reproject based on my presentation strategy that I had set. So if we quickly jump across to our presentation strategies, if I go to my settings menu over here, we can see these presentation profiles. And in a presentation profile, what you have the ability to do is by size, define how you want each one of the locations to be presented. You might have small stores, you might have large stores, and that could dictate both the minimum presentation, but you'll also notice that we can max out the presentation within those locations. The system will then, based on a maximum presentation quantity, the system will then automatically adjust the allocation and the frequency of that allocation to ensure that we don't keep over that maximum, but at the same time, we're sending enough stock to meet the demand. And that's where the concept of a minimum and a maximum from a presentation perspective becomes very important. So if I go back to my allocation strategy, I can see that has finished running. I can go and have a look at it. And what we should see when it reloads is for that store one, now you'll see that it's maxing out around about 20 units. Everything is in little decimals. We obviously will allocate in either whole units or multiples, if there's an order multiple, case pack, or whatever else. But in reality, the system is going to try and keep us at or around 20 units. And then if I scroll all the way down to my store 10 over here, you'll see that the system is ensuring that I'm staying at or about 10 units in that particular example. Okay. So that is an example of a very basic allocation strategy where I've just told the system I've got 1,000 units available to allocate. I gave it a total sales demand of 1,000 units. And I specified in this case that it has a presentation strategy where I have a minimum presentation in the stores, but I also have a maximum that I'm not allowed to go over. Okay. Now, if we think about another demand type, we can also think about core products. So that could be an example of a seasonal product that has a very short life cycle. I want to get it in and get it out. I want to project how it's going to do through its life. And then as it starts selling, I may start tweaking my strategy depending on how that particular product's performing. And we'll get back to that towards the end of the demo. So if we look at another strategy, this is an example of a core product. And a core product obviously has potentially a plan associated with it as the planners are coming up with their projections in terms of how they want to buy into that product, they are wanting to then execute on that plan. So in this case, we can obviously see we've got tons of stock, we've got more stock coming in, we've got receipts arriving over time, we can see when that's all happening. And ultimately, that is seeded from an item plan that we have as part of our assortment planning process. That item plan is used to drive out our receipt generation, our open to buy, and everything else. And as a result of it, it is based on a sales plan that I have as I've designed it for this product in order to buy correctly. So if I'm going to buy in this way, the idea is that we can utilize that same forecast and the effort that was put into generating that forecast in order to manage the life of that product appropriately as we execute on it. So if I go back to my allocation strategy over here and I look at that, the demand plan, what I'm going to see is a very similar demand plan. I'm essentially just inheriting the demand plan from my assortment plan, and I'm using that to execute on for the life of the product. All right. So core products and seasonal products really live together. You've got strategies of products going out and coming in at all different times during the life of the products. And as a result of that, we want to ensure that we are managing that life cycle and we are managing both those core products that might be running off an original plan and those seasonal products that might be short-lived and we just want to get them out as quickly as possible. Okay. The next thing that I want to highlight is the concept of managing the initial allocation of product. In this particular example over here, I just hide that. In this particular example, what we have is and let me just change my view up here and make it a little bit easier for everyone to see some of the details here. In this example, what we see is we have nothing available to us currently. So we've got no current inventory available to allocate. But by the end of the period, we should have 466 units. And that's because we actually have receipts that are coming in. You'll notice that I can add in whatever additional metrics I need to here. So in this case, I want to put in my receipt plan. Receipts, if I could spell. I want to put in my receipt plan to understand how many receipt units are coming in. And that should tell me, obviously, that I've got receipts coming in. Those receipts of 466 are coming in. Now, this strategy is super useful for customers and organizations that are able to cross-stock their inventory. The allocation of a purchase order means that we're aware of every purchase order that is due to arrive, And as a result of it, we can pre-allocate that stock out to the locations, and we can feed that information back to the warehouse where they can cross-dock it as soon as it arrives. We already have the information of which purchase order is coming, which purchase order should be allocated, and where that allocation should go. You could even take it a step further up the supply chain, and you could provide this information to your vendors. By providing the information to your vendors, if you have a relationship with them, they would be able to potentially pre-pack that stock for the stores or even ship it directly to the stores. And that all comes from the fact that we have the ability to recognize both physical inventory that you have in your warehouses, as well as receipts that are coming in that are due to arrive. And the result of this allocation strategy, if I go into my recommended transfer orders, I'll be able to see that the system not only recommends the purchase order that should be allocated from, but it's also recommending the individual line on that purchase order. So we're looking at different purchase orders and when they're arriving. We're looking at how much inventory there might be, and we're then allocating off those purchase orders as they're expected to arrive. So we take the timing into account as well. And this is a fantastic strategy for customers who have a seasonal product coming in. They can plan their strategies long in advance of the product actually arriving. So if I go back to my strategy page and have a look at this, in this example, I'm launching the product in 2 weeks' time, I think 2 weeks' time. But in reality, you can set the strategy 3 months out from the product arriving, and you can already have an idea of how you're going to allocate that stock up to 3 months out or 2 months out or whatever that time frame is. And that again increases the productivity of your allocation process, because you can set this all up in advance. It's not a last minute wait until the stock arrives and then try and figure out where the stock should go. All right. So the ability to allocate off a purchase order is a key concept within the allocations functionality. You'll also notice that there are a couple of additional fields here in the strategy. So if we go back to our original example over here, what I have the ability to do in any one of my strategies is take advantage of both a holdback and a push strategy. These strategies can be used both at the beginning of a season and can potentially be used at the end of a season. So in the first example, if you've got 1,000 units coming into your warehouse and you want to push out all the stock, you don't want to replenish the stores again. This could be because you don't have the space in the warehouse. This could be because it's a special Black Friday product and there's no use keeping it after Black Friday, or Halloween product. It all has to go out before Halloween. There's a number of different reasons you might want to push all of that stock out at the beginning of the season. And we've really simplified the process. We've just utilized our push all strategy. You just check that box and the system will then go and push all of that stock out to all of the locations as soon as it runs. You'll notice that I right-clicked and I ran my allocation strategy. Now that you can do on the fly at any point in time. If I want to go and test different scenarios and rerun my strategy and see what it's expected to do, I can run that strategy, and you'll notice that the colors change on my little icons over here. Once it's finished running, it'll come back and it'll let me know that it was run successfully, and I can then go and see the results. Now, you obviously don't need to do that on any given day. The system does all of this automatically for you overnight. But if you need to change a strategy and see what the impact is going to be, you can quite simply make a change, rerun it, and see what the impact is. You can still keep working on other strategies while it's running, especially if you run 40, 50, 100 different strategies. It might take a couple of minutes for it to run, and therefore you can keep working while it's running. So in this example now, you can see all of the stock is going out as soon as possible. So obviously you can see it arriving based on different lead times to different locations. But all of the stock is going out in a single push. We're pushing all of that stock to the locations. We're holding back sufficient stock to satisfy the warehouse and the e-commerce sales, but the rest of the stock is going out, and it's going to go out to the stores in that single push because I just selected the push all. The classic example for a push all would be at the end of a season. So if I've got stock left over in my DC and I want to put it out in front of the customers, or I want to transition stock from my full price stores to my outlet stores, I can simply just check the push all flag. and it will then get all of that stock out of my locations to ensure that it is all in front of the customer. If you have obviously a location heavy organization. On the flip side of the push all is the holdback, and these two can also be used in conjunction. The idea being that I might want to push out, say, 80% of my inventory up front and hold back 20%. So you can start playing with these different strategies, and this is where we can set an initial strategy and then tweak it further down the line. For example, I had originally set a minimum presentation standard. That could be my starting point to make sure the stores are all presentable. But after about 3 weeks, I might cut the presentation strategy and then just let demand drive the rest of the allocation through the end of the life of the product. In the same way, if I want to hold back, say, 20% of my inventory, I could hold back 20% of the inventory and it will only then push out the remaining 80%. So you can see how these different strategies can be tweaked depending on where you are in the season, whether you're initially allocating or whether you're at the end of the season. You can make these changes and simply set the strategy and let the system do the optimization for us in terms of the ideal allocation and putting the product where it is supposed to go. Okay. Talking about that, letting the system do what it does best, which is optimize towards demand and optimize towards maximizing the sell-through of your stock. If we look at an example that has been selling for a while, and I'll just change my view again here to make it a little bit easier to see. I'm going to look at a retrend view over here. And if we look at a retrend view, what it allows us to do is it allows us to understand what we had expected this product to sell. And it's easiest if I visualize this. So what we had expected to sell for a particular store, how we actualized in terms of our sales. So in this case, we sold slightly less, and then what the system is expecting us to do going forward. This is where we bring in the machine learning capabilities of the system as an assistant to you. It really is working in the background to give you the best possible solution to your problems, and it's taking the heavy lifting out of your day-to-day job. We're not just doing this at a store level. We're obviously going all the way down to a detailed location level and size level. So if certain stores are selling better in certain locations, that is going to change the demand plan going forward. And as a result of that, it is going to pull more stock or less stock for certain stores at certain sizes. This is how the optimization maximizes that sales potential. It prevents us from putting too much stock in a specific location at any point in time, where you may end up in not selling through that stock and having to mark it down. And the flip side, not having it available in stores that are really selling it well because you've pushed all that stock out to your stores. So the ability to be able to understand what that original forecast is, and as we continue to retrend it, understand how we're actualizing and then retrend accordingly is very important. On top of that, we obviously understand all of the promotions that might be taking place. You'll notice over here that we also have promotional lifts. In this example, that's why we have that spike in demand. We have the ability to layer promotions in on top of all of this so that if certain stores are being promoted or certain products are being promoted, the system understands that, it builds that into its demand algorithm, and therefore we're pulling the stock appropriate to that spike in sales because that spike in sales was driven by a promotion that we expected to happen during that time period. So hopefully that gives you an idea about how we approach allocations from this perspective of a user is setting a strategy, what, where, when, and how much do I initially expect this product to sell. The system takes over from there and it does the hard work to figure out what is the optimal allocation and demand solution as a result of that. And then once the product starts selling, it constantly retrends for us to give us the best possible outcome based on the actual sales that are taking place. Now, all of these strategies, as we noticed, can be rolled up into our plan. And that is the goal of the plan. I should be able to go into my allocation plan, and instead of looking product by product, I should be able to roll this all up. And I can then use my grouping function over here to be able to say, okay, I want to look at my let's say, my title of my products. So I can group by location, and then I can start drilling down for each one of my different products to see how each one of those products is expected to perform. I can roll that up, drill that down to any sort of level. We can also give you a sort of a top line view, and you have ultimate flexibility in creating reports from these different perspectives, because we are rolling the data up from a size, location level, and therefore you can look at the data in different perspectives. So for instance, if I wanted to look at an entire store, I can see, okay, how much inventory do I have currently? How much am I expecting to sell, in this case, over the next 8 weeks? How much is the system recommending to allocate to me? How many weeks of supply am I going to be on? But now I can start drilling down to different levels. So I can say, okay, what is the mix between men's and women's? What does it look between outerwears, pants, accessories, etc.? And I can keep drilling down to see, how many weeks of supply I'm going to have, how much the system's allocating out for me. And these sorts of reports make it very easy to evaluate the entire allocation process and be able to understand where the stock is going, when it's going out, and get that sort of top line view all the way down to whatever level of detail you want to. You can also look at it from a product perspective. And this is just an example of an individual product, how each product is expected to be stocked in the stores. So I can very quickly highlight where there are problems in my products in terms of their weeks of supply that they're holding in the stores. I can use conditional formatting to color code it, and therefore I can identify where those problems are, and I can jump into my allocation strategies and start analyzing those. And we have a number of different reports that help you manage all of this. We've got product performance reports that you can look at. We've got mixed reports like that you can look at. You can highlight where the issues are in all of these examples. And these reports are a summation of all of the strategies that we have put together. So in summary, what I wanted to highlight again today, if we go back to our allocation strategies, just highlight the fact that the idea behind the allocations within Toolio is that we set a strategy for a product, we give it our best guess based on information that we have from either our assortment plan that we put together or the user's input, because this can be used entirely independently. We set a strategy for a product, at least initially. We put in what, where, and when. The system does its hard work to give us its best projection. We tweak it as necessary in terms of, do we want to push it all? Do we want to hold it back? Do we want to increase the stock that we're going to hold? Do we want to increase the frequency or decrease the frequency of replenishing? Those are all strategies that we can put in place. And remember, you don't have to go one strategy at a time. I can literally copy the strategy here, check a bunch of them, and then just paste my strategy into all of them. So I can use that concept of a copy paste, or I can drag and drop in all of these examples, very much like Excel, to set my strategies very quickly. I don't have to go through one at a time and set the strategies. It can all be done quite quickly. And the result of all of that is that you set the strategy, the system with all of its smarts and its AI and its machine learning will do the optimization for you. And then you can roll that all up and see if you agree with that plan or not and make tweaks as necessary. So hopefully that gave you a good overview of how you can manage allocations, both for new products that are going to be seasonal, for core products that are going to be ongoing, as well as how you can tweak those strategies in order to manage that life of that product all the way through to the end of the life of the product. Okay. I'll open it up now for any questions. See if anyone has any questions. Trey, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Peter. I think there's a couple of questions and then maybe some more that'll be flowing through. But one question specifically is around overrides. So I know that you touched on that. And this question is, what overrides could I do for a specific location or locations across one of my strategies?
That's a great question. One of the things you'll notice in there is we highlight to the user where there are exceptions or overrides. So for instance, over here, you can see that I've put some strategy overrides in. I've got a little blue indicator. So that means I'm not just sending it to all stores. There might be some sort of deviation from my strategy. And over here, what I can see is I have the ability to take my all store plan, and then I have the ability to deviate it. So in this case, I've cut a couple of stores. They're not going to get any allocation of the product. But you also notice over here, for instance, I have a phase out date. So while all of the stores are planned for a full life start to end of January last year, and I'm planning to be out of this product by January next year, I can start phasing out certain stores, cutting any additional allocation to those stores, and then the system will continue to project how much stock I'll have on the 26th of January, right at the end of the life of the product, but it won't send me any more stock to those stores after the 31st of December. You can obviously tweak your order cycle. If you have certain stores that maybe you want to hold a bit less stock in, you can tweak your safety stock. You can tweak your order cycle for the frequency. So there's a lot of different overrides that you can make if you need to. But again, the goal is to let the system do as much of the work as possible. This is really strategic thinking. I do not want this product in the store, or I do not want this product to allocate to these stores after a certain date. Those are strategic thinking, and then you let the system take over from there. Okay. What else?
I think we have another question around the defaults. So under specific like size curve, they see a lot of defaults in there. How is it that you have the same default, but there's multiple different items in this view?
Okay, that's a really great question. So this comes back to efficiency of setting allocation strategies. If you were to go through every single one and come up with a size curve that is specific for that particular product, you could create 1,000 size curves or 1,000 sales curves. So what we've done is we've given the users the ability in their, let's say, their size curves or their sales curves. We've given the user the ability to utilize this concept of partitioning. So what partitioning does is you define what level you want to calculate the data at. So for instance, if I'm using an alpha curve, but I want to understand the difference between how men's outerwear sells versus women's outerwear, I define the partitions at division, department, class. You could go to product, you could go to color, you could go to price point, you could do whatever you want. And the system is going to calculate individually, in this example, the contribution of those particular sizes for those particular products at the individual location level. And because we understand the partitions, we can link that partition back to the individual product. So if I'm allocating a woman's outerwear, I know that extra small contributes really little, and extra small is not allowed to go to any of those stores. But if I'm allocating a men's outerwear, I can see there's zero contribution from extra small. I don't sell extra small, and I can see the contribution is different. So that means I can create one size curve that covers, at least from a default perspective, a whole bunch of product types. And the same would be true for my sales curves and my location curves. These are all the modeling techniques that we have in there. So for instance, what is the shape of demand for men's outerwear jackets versus rainwear versus women's outerwear jackets, etc. We're understanding the different shapes and potentially how different locations are performing in terms of their seasonality. And we're able to model that into our sales curves and our size curves so that we can create a single curve that actually has multiple curves underneath it. And that again just speaks back to the efficiency of the process for the users. We don't want it to be arduous for the users to set an allocation strategy. It needs to be really simple for them. So this partitioning allows us to create a default curve and then assign that default curve to multiple different strategies and let the system automatically identify where in that partition the particular product is associated from. Okay. Any other questions?
Great. From what I'm seeing, not right now, there's not any, but if anybody has anything else last minute to throw into that Q&A box, definitely feel free. But from my side, that is all that I have, Peter.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for spending some time with us. I hope it was informative and things to think about in terms of how allocation of product works, in terms of your presentations and sending different product at different times and managing that optimal allocation. If there are any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, and we're looking forward to sharing some more insights as we bring them out. So thanks very much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.